Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of Meezan lecture series. If you recall, we had started to study the chapter on faith and beliefs in Ustaz Javed Ghamid's book Meezan, which, as you would all know, is his understanding of the contents of Islam. He has divided this book into two distinct portions. One of the portions deals with the philosophy of religion and comprises of faith and beliefs and morals and morality, which is the one which we are currently studying. The other portion relates to the Sharia, and we have finished that portion earlier on. And it has also been surmised several times here that the order in which we are proceeding here is not the same as the one in which the book is compiled, but once the series finishes, it will be compiled in the same order and sequence as the book itself. The book also has two preambles. One relates to the overall framework of Islam, and also another preamble that relates on the principles of understanding religion. So, as far as faith and beliefs is concerned, the chapter on faith and beliefs, we had begun studying that in our last session, and we had seen how how faith itself is something about which the Quran says is already found. Its awareness is already found in human beings. It's not something which is forced upon them in a forceful way. It is something that they can understand, they can feel, and at the same time, there is a need to testify to this faith, and that, of course, is through our practices, not only through our tongue, but through our deeds as well. So we had started off with the various articles of faith, with the article on God Himself. So belief in God was the first topic of this whole chapter, and we had seen how the being of God has been referred to in the Quran. We have seen that the Quran actually says very little about the being of God, because as we know that we cannot observe Him in any way. So we have to confine ourselves to know Him by knowing His attributes and by knowing His dealings and practices. So as far as His attributes are concerned, we'll discuss them. And dealings and practices are the ones that we are going to discuss today. So the Quran actually calls these dealings and practices of God as Sunnatullah, the way God deals with His creatures, the way He conducts His affairs with creatures. So the Almighty says that these practices are permanent, they are unalterable. And for a true comprehension of God, just as knowledge of His attributes is essential, knowledge of His dealings with His creation and creatures is also essential. So we will discuss these dealings and these practices, but before we do that, it is essential that there are certain premises which must be clearly understood in our minds. And Ustaz Ghamidi has actually summarized these premises in the form of a citation from Ustaz Amin Islahi, and he says that Ustaz Amin Islahi has actually delineated these premises before we actually go into these practices in a very precise way. So the first thing Ustaz Islahi says is that the Almighty has created each person with a noble nature. The person does not have a corrupt nature. Every person who is born on his fitrah, and this ability which a person has to discriminate between good and evil has given him the freedom to choose whatever good or evil he wants to adopt. So after that, his becoming a good or a bad person is dependent on his attitude and, of course, on the grace of the Almighty. So a person has this leverage. He has the capacity to either choose good and or choose evil. So if he tries to adhere to good, to virtue, the Almighty's grace impels him to more virtue. And if he adopts evil, the Almighty, if He wants to, leaves him to tread the path of evil. So this is the first thing which has been surmised by Ustaz Amin Islahi. The second thing which he has said is that issues on which the Almighty will hold a person accountable are those in which he has the freedom to choose and exercise his free will. I mean, this is something which is absolutely logical. People who do not have this freedom will not be held accountable by Him. This freedom to exercise one's will has been granted by the Almighty, and it is not something which a person possesses. A person exercises his will while remaining subservient to the will of God. The Almighty, on the basis of His own will and wisdom, may not allow a person to achieve what he intends. However, because of some reason which only God's wisdom can encompass, if he does not allow a virtuous intention of a person to materialize, he does not deprive him of its reward. Similarly, if he does not allow evil intent to materialize, he does not mean that this does not mean that he will necessarily acquit a person in the hereafter. So this is the second very important thing regarding the freedom that we have to exercise our choice of good and evil. The third thing which Ustaz Amin Islahi has referred to here is that wherever the will of God has been mentioned in the Quran, it only means that except for God himself, no one has the power to stop him from materializing it or to alter it in any way. So there are instances in the Quran in which it is said that he will guide whomsoever he wants, or he will relegate whomsoever he wants. So all these expressions of his will does not mean that he's going to do it haphazardly. It only means that when he decides to do so, and of course he's going to decide to do so on the basis of his wisdom, then no one will be able to stop him. So the Almighty, because of the fact that he is wise and just, and nothing that he does is devoid of justice and wisdom, so wherever his will is stated in the Quran, it must be considered subservient to his wisdom and justice, as per which he is running the affairs of this world. It would not be correct to assume that he would not contrarily, or he would act contrarily to whatever practice he has initiated for himself and to the justice and wisdom he has chosen for himself. So, for example, the Quran says that God guides, as I just said, God guides whomsoever he wills and leads astray whomsoever he wills. So this statement does not depict the fact that he has his own way of guiding people. It only means that he is going to give guidance to people who would like that guidance. And when he decides to give that guidance, then there's no one who can stop that person. So this is something which actually does away with the evil creed of intercession, as is understood by people, that people think that they can make God do whatever they want to if they please certain other saintly people. So this is what the Quran intends to say, or explicitly says here, that when he decides to do something, no one can stop him from doing that. There is no favorites amongst his creatures who can ever stop him from implementing his will. The fourth thing which Ustaz Amin Islahi has surmised in this regard is that in the Quran we find certain acts being attributed to God, I mean certain deeds and certain practices. But the real objective in this regard is not the ascription of these acts, it is their ascription to certain laws and principles on the basis of which these acts materialize. So because these laws and principles have been set by the Almighty, he has attributed the acts which emanate on the basis of these laws and principles to himself at certain places in the Quran. A very clear example cited by Ustaz Islahi is the verse 5 of Surah 61 for Surah Saf, which says, فَلَمَّا أَزَاغُوا أَزَاغَ اللَّهُ قُلُوبَهُمْ. And when they deviated from the truth, God led their hearts away from the truth. So on such occasions, the Quran also refers to the principle on the basis of which a certain act emanates. For example, when it is said that God only leads astray the disobedient, the defiant, it actually means that there are other areas in the Quran which explain clearly that when God leads away someone, it's not because of his own choice or out of his own choice. It is because of the fact that God himself is doing it on the basis of his own law and his own authority. The fifth thing which is mentioned in this regard is that the eternal and all-embracing knowledge of the Almighty does not negate any of the practices and laws set by him. Undoubtedly, he knows from the very beginning whether a person will adopt the right path or go astray. However, besides this, he also knows that a person will adopt or reject the right path in accordance with the law of guidance prescribed by him. So these are the five very important premises which Ustaz Amin Islahi has stated, and to these Ustaz Ghamidi says that two more things must be clearly added, and of course they have to be understood. The first thing in this regard is that certain things are attributed to God also because he's the first cause, and nothing can originate or materialize without his will, and certain things are attributed to us because at times we become worthy of them. We become worthy of them. So the Quran says, as you will see from this verse, I'm just going to read the translation so that we can, save some time also. These people accept your prophethood by their tongue, and if they are blessed with some success, they say, this is from God. But if they are inflicted with loss, they say, it was because of you. Tell them everything is from God. So whatever happens, happens with His permission. What has come over these people that they are not prepared to understand anything? This is a reality that whatever good befalls you is from God's grace, and whatever ill befalls you is from your own self. Their real ailment is that they are hesitant about your prophethood, so don't care about them. We have sent you forth as a messenger for mankind, and for this God's evidence, God's evidence is sufficient. So, viewers, you can clearly see that as far as this verse is concerned, those people are addressed who are attributing their success to God and their failures to the prophet. So they are told that the actual reality is that both good and evil manifest with the will and permission of God. Without His consent, nothing can come into being. The difference, however, is that good comes into being as a requisite of God's mercy, and evil comes into being because of a person's bad deeds. So, viewed thus, evil is related to one's own self. Also, one thing that must be kept in mind here is that God is an embodiment of good. He has created this world as a manifestation of His mercy. So, to ascribe any evil to Him is against His noble attributes. Evil comes into being because of a person's misuse of his free will. The Almighty has granted a person a certain sphere in which he has the freedom to exercise his will. This freedom is a great favor of the Almighty. It is on its basis that human beings occupy preeminence among other creations and creatures. And it is on this basis that in the hereafter they will be held accountable and rewarded or punished accordingly. In the absence of this freedom, there would have been no difference between a human being and an animal. One thing but that needs to be still kept in mind is that this freedom is not unlimited and unrestricted. This freedom is restricted to a certain sphere, and then within that sphere too, it is subservient to the will and wisdom of the Almighty. Without His will and permission, a person cannot fulfill any of his intent or any of his anything that he has planned to do will not be fulfilled unless God allows it to materialize. Good intentions also materialize because of His grace, and bad intention also materialize because of the respite He grants to bad people. If the Almighty allows a certain evil intent to materialize, this is attributed to God because it materialized because of His will and consent. But from another angle, it is an act of a human being because it was a product of His will. And what must further be understood is that whenever the Almighty allows the evil of a person or a group of persons to become rampant in a society, this is because at a collective level, some benefit or well-being of His creation is intended. At certain instances, giving such opportunity to evil to flourish is to test the righteous so that their weaknesses are done away with and their qualities are polished. So remember, every test polishes a person's abilities and it brings out his weaknesses so that he can overcome them. At certain other instances, the reason is to leave the wicked and the evil with no excuse to deny the truth and to bring to an end their period of respite. And at still other instances, the Almighty creates circumstances so that what is hidden in the nature of people is revealed. Thus, not only righteous deeds emanate from them as a result, but evil deeds also emanate from people who have them hidden in themselves, because basically this is something which they potentially had. The second thing which Ustaz Ghamidi adds to those 5 premises that we have just discussed regarding Ustaz Islahi is that the basis of the directive of good and evil and right and wrong is that what is in accordance with the attributes of God and what is against them. So this is the criteria that we have. We praise justice because justice is an attribute of God. And for this reason, its liking has been ordained in our nature. This directive is relative as such, but is also eternal because the attributes of God are eternal. Also, there is no clash or conflict between these attributes, so that the Almighty on no occasion or on one occasion wills something which is in accordance with his attributes, and at another occasion wills something which is in conflict with his attributes. In all circumstances, he fully adheres to justice. And this is precisely what the Quran has stated in these words: God bears witness that there is no God but He, and so do the angels and people in this world who have true knowledge. He is fully adherent to justice. There is no other God. He is the mighty, the wise. So clearly, you can see that Quran has actually mentioned this, and the reference that God is adherent to justice is a very important constituent of faith. When God says that He is adherent to justice, it is a very, very important constituent of faith, and so close it is to the essence of Islam that one can say that it is, in fact, Islam per se. The importance it occupies requires that some points regarding this aspect be discussed. And Ustaz Hamiduddin Farahi actually has pointed out these aspects. So, the first thing that he says is that the word Iman, which is of course faith, originates from the verbal noun Amin. This, in other words, means that believing in something and adhering to it is ingrained in the very nature of Iman. As an obvious consequence of this, it is essential that a person must have a deep conviction on the existence of God. But this conviction can only be achieved if a person believes that intellect is primarily meant to guide him and not to misguide him. It should be accepted that intellect by its nature is a barometer of justice within a person. This premise necessarily leads to another conclusion, and that is human nature is created by the Almighty on the principles of justice and equity. And the reason for this is that the Almighty, being an embodiment of justice and equity, holds justice and equity very dear, and is also one who wants to establish justice and equity everywhere. So all these conclusions are a logical consequence and are in fact self-evident. It is also apparent from what we have just discussed and what we have just sort of explained that one cannot verify the veracity of something unless the creator is regarded to be an embodiment of truth and justice, unless God is regarded to be a personification of truth and justice. So from this fact, all the actions and deeds which emanate from God are regarded to be just, and the way this fact is validated through intellect, it also is validated through universal truths. An explanation of this, of course, compact premise, of course, this is a very precise one, can be that the Almighty has ingrained piety in human nature and has made hearts inclined to relish and cherish and accept piety, isn't it? In such a situation, how is it possible for us that we like piety and God regards someone who likes piety to be not liked? How can we regard our liking for the truth to be true if we are not satisfied with the liking for the truth of our Creator? We want to please Him by doing a good deed because we are satisfied that He is pleased by a good deed. We ascribe good attributes to Him because in liking these attributes, we are fully convinced of the veracity of our nature. So this is something that we have to understand, that this is what Ustaz Farahi has clearly set out. The second thing which Ustaz Farahi says is that the foundation of faith, now this is something very important, something that requires your attention, please, that the foundation of faith is love for God, is love for God. We profess faith in God, whom we love, whom we want to please, and from whom we have high hopes and expectations. And this is not possible unless we are certain that it is absolutely impossible that He be unjust and oppressive. He will grant His favors to those who will obey Him and punish only those who are worthy of punishment. It is against human nature to love an unjust and oppressive master. The third thing which Ustaz Farai says is that if one deliberates on the favors and blessings of the Almighty, the foundation of the requirement of professing faith in God, which emerges in human nature, what is it? It is gratitude. It is thankfulness. This gratitude becomes mandatory when one accepts that it is the right of the Creator who has bestowed these favors on us and a requisite of these favors. It is this very reality on the basis of which the Quran is called shirk or polytheism as zulm, which is injustice, and iman as gratitude. So it is this very reason because of which the basis of a person demanding his rights is a necessity of justice. This is a self-evident reality of Sharia and law as well. And on these very grounds, the basis of every Sharia is justice and fairness. So bear with this because you can clearly see that these are some very important philosophical and fundamental precepts. The fourth thing in this regard, which Ustaz Farai has mentioned, is that the consequence of faith is obedience to God, and the consequence of obedience to God is the pleasure of God, is the raza of God. In every deed and act which is done, there is a similar relationship of causation which the Almighty has established through His commands and directives and has guided us in various ways towards it. And since we have full conviction on these results of deeds, so while relying on His promises, we obey Him. If we do not have faith on the fact that God honors His promises, all bases of deeds will be totally smashed and razed to ground. And all reliance will remain on either of the following. I mean, we will have just two options left. Like, for example, the Christians on the false notion of intercession, which totally depends on Christ, whom they worship as a deity and love more than God Himself, or like the Jews, on their deviation from the truth and their short sightedness. They abandon their ship to the winds. They abandoned their ship to the winds, and because of their arrogance and pride, did not remain content with the judgment of God, as if to them there was no principle before God to discriminate good from evil. To protect a person from going astray in this manner, it is essential that that person has full conviction that God adheres to justice and every directive and promise of His is true. And as the Quran has said at certain instances, وَتَمَّتْ كَلِمَةُ رَبِّكَ صِدْقًا وَعَدْلًا, which means that fulfilled was the word of God, or fulfilled was the word of your Lord in their favor with truth and justice. So this is the background, this is the foundation on which now we will be studying those practices of God. These are 7 in number. We might not finish them today, but we'll start off with these practices and dealings. But remember, if we understand these philosophical, foundational premises that we have just discussed, in the words of Ustaz Amin as Islahi, in the words of his own mentor, Ustaz Hamiduddin Farahi, as has been surmised and summarized by Ustaz Javed and Ghamidi, we will be taking the first step in the right direction towards understanding what faith is, what beliefs are. And also, just to remind you that it is these dealings and practices of the Almighty that have been called Sunnatullah. So just as we call Sunnah to be a trodden path, to be a beaten path, so Sunnatullah means an established practice of the Prophet, of the Almighty. He is not going to go back on this practice. This is as certain to happen as a physical law itself. So these are like moral laws. These practices are like moral laws, and they are bound to materialize, just as in science, gravity or any other fact of science is a reality that science cannot go against. Now, let us study the first of these practices. The first of these practices has been called as tests and trials. We can give it a title, and that is tests and trials. So, what does this mean? It means that God has created this world for trial and test. This is the first thing that we have to understand, that the foremost important Sunnatullah or practice of God when He deals with His people is tests and trials. By not understanding this practice, we are not able to explain this world. We are not able to reconcile the misery found in this world with the mercy of God. And this has led many people to atheism. This has led Buddha to found the whole new creed called Buddhism. So remember, if this practice is not understood, we will not be understanding something that can make us believe in God. So every single person on the face of this earth encounters these trials, And as such, God's practice of putting mankind through trials is a universal phenomenon. Whatever is ingrained in human nature comes to surface because of these trials. And the secrets of the inner personality of a person are revealed through these very trials. Remember, we have discussed this, that our own potentials, they blossom, they are polished through these trials. And the extent which a person can attain in his beliefs, in his ideologies, and in his deeds are ascertained through these very trials, because these trials come, and if one has the power, the courage, the will to face them, he is going to fly higher and higher than before. The Quran says that life and death have been created for the very purpose of judging who among mankind adopts a rebellious attitude towards his Creator and who leads a life according to the liking of his Creator. So, no doubt God has knowledge of everything, but He has set the practice for Himself that He does not merely reward and punish people on the basis of His own knowledge. He could have done so. He knows what's going to happen. But the methodology He has adopted is that He does so on the basis of the deeds of people. For this very purpose, He has implemented the system of trial on the face of this earth. And this is something which the Quran has very explicitly, very clearly stated at many instances. So, for example, in Surah Mulk, this is verse 67, verse 2 of the Surah Mulk, 67, Surah number 67, it says, الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور. He who created death and life, that He might test you as to which of you is best regarding deeds, and He is also mighty and forgiving. Now, the circumstances of sorrow and happiness, poverty and affluence, grief and joy, which a person encounters in this very world, are actually governed by this practice of God. Happiness and sorrow, poverty and affluence, grief and joy, it's not because of some reward or punishment. It is because through these situations, God puts us through tests. And of course, when He blesses someone with affluence and status, He tests whether such people will remain grateful to Him or not. And when He afflicts someone with poverty and hardships, He tests whether such people will remain patient or not. And this is precisely what has been stated in Surah Anbiya, verse 35. It says, وَنَبْلُوكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ فِتْنَةً وَإِلَيْنَا تُرْجَعُونَ. They should not show arrogance on their status. We are inflicting you with sorrow and happiness to test you, and to us shall you return one day. So, وَنَبْلُوكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ فِتْنَةً. The reason that God is putting us through sorrowful circumstances and happy circumstances is to test us. And this is something. So we were discussing the fact that these good and bad circumstances, they are not a product of our deeds primarily. They are to put us through test. And if the Almighty gives wealth and status to people, as I said, it is because He wants to check them. He wants to see if by being blessed with these favors, does a person become proud and arrogant, pompous and conceited, and ends up ill-treating the poor, and does not spend on other people from what God has blessed that person with. So, also on the contrary, when He deprives people of wealth, He does so to see if they remain patient in such circumstances, and if they are thankful to Him or not. And all these facilities and provisions which this earth is endowed with are meant to test human beings. These provisions, in other words, are not provided to them for their indulgence or for their pleasure. They are a means to try those people or creatures of the earth. So by providing them, or by providing these facilities to human beings, the Almighty is judging whether they seek the comprehension of the Creator and in this way attain success in the hereafter, or lose their way by indulging in them. And this is precisely what the Quran has stated here. It says, "Inna ja'alna ma ala al-ardi zinatan laha linabluwahum ayyuhum ahsanu amala." This is Surah Kahf, verse 7. says, and we have decked the earth with whatever is in it, so we can test them that who is the best regarding his deeds. So the what we find in this earth, the comforts of the earth, all these are meant to try and test us. All these are meant to make us realize that we are passing through a certain situation and we must not forget that. So these are the details of the law of trial and test, and that which we are generally faced as human beings. And one thing which Ustaz Ghamidi has pointed out here is that a specific form of this law comes into play, a very specific. Remember, this is what we have just discussed in a general way up to now. But then he says that there is a very specific form of this law that comes into play in the times of the messengers of God. And what is that? So, at the behest of the Almighty, their preaching culminates in the worldly judgment of their adversaries, and those who claim to profess faith in these messengers are, during the course of this propagation, put through certain trials and tests which are generally not faced by others. So, in other words, the Sahaba, the companions, they are really put to very tough tests. And this is something which the Quran has also mentioned, Surah Ankabut, verses 2 and 3. It says, do people think that once they say we believe in the Rasul, they will be left alone and not be tried? Indeed, we tried all those who lived before them. So God will surely know the truthful and also know the liars. Clearly, we can see that this is something that relates to the messengers of God, and of course his companions. So once these messengers, they are able to disseminate the truth to their adversaries to the extent that they are left with no excuse to deny the truth, this test actually manifests itself to isolate and separate the believers from the disbelievers before the latter are punished. So they are practically segregated. They are separated from one another so that the punishment could be implemented. Now, the implication is that before the judgment is delivered, it is clearly known where each person stands. At certain places in the Quran too, this law and practice of God is mentioned with very similar emphasis, something which is absolutely apparent. So in Surah Baqarah, verses 155 and 156, the words are, in this cause we shall definitely test you with some fair and some famine, and some loss of property and life, and some loss in fruits. And O Prophet, give glad tidings of success in this world and in that to come to those who persevere in this cause. Those who, when afflicted with some calamity, say, we belong to God, and to Him one day we shall return. So clearly, you can see that this surah here in these verses tells us that for the companions, the test of going through these circumstances in which there could be a loss of life, there could be a loss of affluence, of crops, as the Quran says, anfus wal amwal wal anfus was samarat. So this is bound to happen. This may or may not happen with people who are not companions. Other people might be tried with affluence, but for the companions, this test is a must. And this is also a part of the trial through which they are put through. And as a result, of course, if they pass this trial, then the gain and the reward also is in commensuration to it. So I'm going to end this session here today, and we can have those Q&A, the Q&A segment. Just to remind you that we have discussed the first practice of the Almighty only until now, and that is the practice or the Sunnatullah, that this world has been created on trial and test. And if this premise is not understood, a very, very vast part of this earth, or this what goes on in this earth, simply cannot be explained. It does not make sense that God is merciful and then we find such misery. Or if God is merciful, we find that people who are evil, they make hay, they climb at the top of the ladder in a society. So before we discuss this practice, we refer to certain philosophical foundations of this whole concept of faith and beliefs. And inshallah, in our next sessions, we'll be discussing the remaining 6 practices or 6 sunnatullahs of God. But for now, we can start with your questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. To ask your questions, you may either raise your hand or post them in the chat. And if you'd like to remain anonymous, you can send them directly to me. Our first question asks, Is it correct to say that we have fragments of Allah in us since we have His traits and emotions, even though minute?
Yes, I think this would be correct. And I think this is precisely what the Old Testament has said in the book of Genesis when it is said that God has created man in his own image. So this is like telling us that in a very minuscule or a very microscopic level, the attributes that God has are found in us as well. And this in itself is God's mercy and wisdom, because through this we are able to understand and comprehend God much more, because we see a very small part of that in our own selves.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, did Judas's betrayal count as a test of the companions?
You see, whether it was a test or not for the companions, I mean, we have to think that it is something which he did, I mean, in a way that was absolutely inappropriate. And the situation which resulted as a consequence was that, of course, people were put to test and trial, because now their prophet was I mean, he was had become vulnerable, and he was arrested by the Jewish authorities. We know, so we can clearly see that, or at least they tried to arrest him, but God did not let it happen. So you can say that yes, this is in a form, in a way, it was a trial for the companions, but I think it was a bigger trial for Jesus himself.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. I'd like to remind the participants that if we run out of questions, we may end the session early. So, calling for more questions. A couple more in the chat that ask, what is the role of angels in this test?
So we will be discussing this role in a separate session, because there is a whole session which will revolve around belief in the angels. So remember the five tenets of faith: faith in God, faith in prophets, faith in angels, faith in the books of God, and faith in the hereafter. So these are the five tenets of faith. So one of them is faith in the angels, or belief in the angels, and well, what you just said, we'll be discussing it in much more detail in one of the few sessions, or one of the coming sessions.
Thank you. The next question asks, why has Allah chosen to reward us in the hereafter only after going through the trials and tests of the worldly life?
I mean, this is something which is very logical. You earn something by your doing, and that is what God has chosen. I mean, if we deserve something, it should be on the basis of what we do, and that is precisely the system that we have made on the face of this earth. We reward people for what they have, for what they did rightly, and we punish them for what they did wrongly, isn't it? I mean, everything happens from a classroom to a court of law. All things that we have assembled here in this world is precisely on the same basis, because now a person becomes worthy of whatever he or she is given. He or she will not complain, because whatever that person did would be something that would corroborate the fate. So precisely for the same reason, God is rewarding us, or is going to reward us or punish us by putting us through this test, and then the consequence of that test will be flashed before us, and we will absolutely agree that yes, this is the fate I deserve.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Shabnam, please go ahead.
जी थैंक यू भैया सर मुझे इस हदीस की ऑथेंटिसिटी चेक करनी थी जिसमें प्रॉफिट पीस बी अपॉन हिम ने फरमाया कि एक शख्स सारी जिंदगी बुरे काम करता है लेकिन अपनी मौत के नजदीक तकदीर से कोई अच्छा काम करता है और जन्नत में दाखिल हो जाता है और इसी तरह कोई शख्स सारी उम्र अच्छे काम करता है लेकिन बुरी तकदीर से एंड पे वो कोई ऐसा बुरा काम करता है और वो जहन्नमी हो जाता है तो सर आप काइंडली थोड़ा सा बताएंगे
I think, I mean, always remember that our hadiths, they are fragmentary, which means that on many occasions they don't present the whole detail. Also, they are situational, which means it's not that the Prophet is sitting one day and he's giving a lecture on something, and that lecture is being recorded and then reported to us. That's not the case. Often it is situational. In fact, on 100% occasions, something happens and people either ask something from him, or maybe if he passes by, he will give his view on something. So our hadiths are fragmentary, which is the first principle, which means that they don't encompass all details. Number two, they are situational, which means that there must be a certain situation in which something happened and people reported that situation. But because of the fact that they are fragmentary, many narrators, they leave out a lot of details. So in order to understand a narrative, we have to fill in the gaps and at the same time understand a narrative in the light of the Quran. So if we do this, regardless of whether this narrative is reported authentically or not, as far as the isnad is concerned, let us suppose that it is something that is reliably reported. Then what is said is very simple. That at times you make a mess out of something that you do, in spite of the fact that you do something good all your life. You might be a very kind and a considerate person, but right near the end of life, something you do, like for example, you might end up doing a grave thing, like even killing someone or doing something that is absolutely nasty, that might tilt the balance in the on the other side. You were doing, I mean, you had a positive balance. Your statement of account was going positive, but you did something so bad that it tilted towards the negative side. Similarly, it could be the other way around. All your life you were doing a lot of sins, and then you realized, and then you had the time to make up for your sins and to actually compensate for them and do good deeds. So it actually tells us that don't think that life is something that has, life has nothing to give you. You have all the time in the world, because at times a very short span would be enough for you to compensate something bad that you did. Similarly, you should not be overconfident that something good that you did all your life or a better part of your life might not still take you to the right or to paradise, because near the end you totally messed up the righteous life that you had spent. So I think it's
Sir,
like a warning.
confusion. सर सॉरी सर टू इंटरप्ट यू सर कंफ्यूजन वर्ड तकदीर से हो रही थी कि वो तकदीर से ऐसा
As I
काम कर
said,
गुजर
I mean, the word
जी
takdeer does not mean that something has been ordained for us. It means
राइट
something
सर
that we chalk out for our own selves.
राइट सर थैंक यू सर
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our next question asks, in Buddhism, they say suffering is only caused by attachment. So if we were to be detached, would Allah not give us trials?
I mean, there would be other forms of trials. Remember, trials don't come merely through detachment. There are several ways. There are so many allurements. There are so many attractions. There are so many other things that can still cause that luring that we have. Even our own nafs, from inside, we have those provocations. So this is not the right way to deal with these provocations. That is what divine religions tell us that whenever you feel those attractions or wherever you feel vulnerable, then escapism is not the right way. Don't escape. Don't adopt a policy in which you just would like to forego everything. You have to live in the thick of things and then use your willpower to counter them. And if you succumb to your willpower, I mean, you succumb to these attractions and provocations in spite of exercising your willpower, then God is going to still help you because you tried your best. So escapism is not an option. It is to fight the challenges in the middle of everything, and even at times not passing through, because the real thing that God wants us to do is to try our best. And it does not, I mean, God is going to relent in matters in which we might try our best and still we are not able to be up to the mark, because at least we tried. So I think this is a basic fundamental difference between Buddhism and the philosophy that has been put forth by Islam and all divine religions, I would say.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, is this test because we chose it? Otherwise, it won't be there.
No, I mean, chosen in the sense that yes, we gave this consent to the Almighty, which the Quran has depicted in Surah in Quran, and for example in Surah Ahzab, it says that the authority to exercise our will was an option that was given to the earth, to the heavens, and to human beings, and to the mountains, but they declined and said that it would be difficult for us to bear this. And human beings, because they are zalum and jahula, as the Quran says, at that instance, they said, yes, we would like to face this challenge. We would like to come to grips with this challenge. So remember, it is the Almighty who had asked us before we were born, and the Quran has said this, that we don't remember that happening, but it did happen, that we were given this choice, that that the Almighty said that I'm going to send you in this world with the ability to exercise your own will, and you'll have a certain amount of freedom in a certain sphere, and that is something that you will have. So the other elements of nature, they said that we are not up to it, but human beings said that yes, we face this challenge, or we'll take up this challenge. So yes, in a way we can say that we chose what we are at the moment facing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Salman Aziz, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum salam.
So there was answer to a previous question that do we have some fragments of the attributes probably or something like that of Allah Almighty in us? So the
Right.
answer wasn't somewhat affirmative, sir. So may I humbly submit, sir, won't this concept led us aspire towards the concept of Wahdatul Wujud, which itself is
Of
not
what?
correct?
What this concept will do what?
Lead us aspire towards the concept of Wahdatul Wujud, which itself is not correct.
Hmm. No, I don't think so. You see, if you comprehend it in the correct way, otherwise, you see, every right concept can be misconstrued. Misconception is something that can arise from even the basic things that we might consider to be absolutely correct. So it is our correct comprehension of things. If you are able to comprehend the fact that God is, I mean, you see, the thing is that we cannot see God. So the biggest thing that is like an impediment to our attachment is that the closest thing that I find, or maybe people would agree with me that they find, which is somewhat resembling on a very small scale to God, is, for example, our own parents or our own, maybe our mother. But you see, I can see my mother, everyone can see their mothers, and hence that attachment is very tangible, is something which is very forthcoming. But the thing is that when God is invisible to us, we just cannot have any idea of who He is. The only way that we can know God is through His attributes and His practices. So when He said that I have created man in my own image, He is actually telling us that some of the attributes that I have, you will also experience them, so that you can understand who I am. You will have that attribute in a very small level, and I'll have that attribute at an infinite level, so that you know who God is. So you see, this is like compensating our lack of visibility of God. We cannot see Him, but somehow we have to comprehend Him. So it is an opportunity to comprehend God by reflecting inwardly on our own selves and thinking that if I am just, it is because God is just. If I am truthful, it is because God is truthful. So you see, it is that interconnection which has to be understood.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Akram Bhatti, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Well,
So this is regarding Allah Mia's trial. Some people are very, pious, regular for salah and zakah and everything, and and they have multiple ailments. And I know a couple of people, myself, and I would discuss it. I tell them, Allah is testing your patience, and they go, "But
right.
hold on, I've been sick over years after year after year, and I know them for a lot of years. So how can we explain it better? Because once in a while we get into this, and they always say, how long? Right? It's been, so that's.
I mean, yeah, I mean, this is precisely what we are discussing today. That if the Sunnatullah of trials and tests is not understood properly, then I mean, there is this, we cannot comprehend this world at all. And as I said, a better part of today's world, when it is turning into atheism or is taken to atheism, one of the fundamental causes of atheism is that they are not able to reconcile God's mercy with the misery that they face in this world. The only plausible explanation is what the Quran has given us, and said that, well, this is a place of trial and test. You have to prove yourself worthy. You'll be faced with tough circumstances, very difficult circumstances. So you have to prove your mettle. I mean, in the absence of this understanding or comprehension of the sunnatullah of trials and tests, as I said, it would become virtually impossible to make people understand. So they have to first of all see that this is what the Quran states. It says, وَنَبْلُوكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ fitna. The word shar in the Arabic language also refers to sorrows and to calamities. And khair refers to happiness as well. So God is telling us that these calamities and these bouts of happiness that you face are meant for your trial and test. They are not meant to reward or punish you. So that is how I think, I mean, of course, it's also a case-to-case issue. It all depends where a person gets stuck. But I've just given you a generic answer. Otherwise, you see, what happens is that you have to deal with such people in a very psychological way, and they have to tell them that when they shall be compensated for the patience that they are at the moment being demanded, that compensation would be immense, something that would totally drench them, and they will forget about these miseries. And this is what God has actually stated in the Quran. And also, please tell your friend or people who have this I would say viewpoint, that if they look at the lives of the prophets of God, the trials that they faced were, I mean, they were really, really very tough. The biggest trial when I think of the trial of Prophet Abraham, when he saw in his dream that he was to slaughter his son as a will of the Almighty. Do any of us have the courage even to think of what he might have gone through? And not only that, his son Ishmael himself said, "Yes, I am up to it." He was just a 14 or 15-year-old lad. Of course, he grew up to be a prophet of God, but he was not a prophet at the age of 14 or 15. So imagine the ordeal of Prophet Abraham when he was going to put his son to the knife. So remember, whenever you face those trials, remind yourself of the trials of these prophets of God, and the trials. I mean, look at the prophet Job, who's mentioned as Ayub in the Quran. The extent of trials that he went through is described in the Quran briefly. But if you look at the book of Job in the Bible, you'll see how I mean afflicted he was with so many ailments, and what happened to him, and how he was placed in the society in a certain way, and totally became deprived of those things. So I think two things might help that person. First, you make him understand that this is how God has made this world, and other, that you are not the only one. In fact, the trial that you might be passing is very small compared to the trials that his prophets or his appointed envoys faced.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We have a bunch of short chat questions. The first one asks, would Allah make us commit minor sins to protect us from major sins or larger sins?
I mean, why would he do that? Whatever is to be done, we choose to do it. Remember, it's not God who is going to drive us to do certain things. The only thing is that there are certain things that he might not allow to happen. For example, if you have an evil intent, maybe circumstances don't make that evil intent to materialize. But that is not something that he is going to drive. I mean, he's not going to push you to do something or not to do something. So I think whether we do minor sins or major sins, it is that we do it on our own intent. It is because of my choice that I end up doing that.
Thank you very much. The next one asks, لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله का मफहूम बता दीजिए.
So la hawla wa la quwwata means there is no power and there is no strength except through God. Hawl and quwwa are virtually have the same meaning, which means that whatever power and God I see in myself or I see manifested outside of me is something which only God can give. So it's like a statement that refutes polytheism and actually affirms that every power and strength, the fountainhead of every power and strength is God himself.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, is it because of these fragments, that he's talking about Allah's traits, that we're also attracted to power and wisdom since we don't have them inherently?
But not necessarily. I mean, I said that it's not at all the traits of God are worthy of, for example, emulation. So, for example, the Almighty says that He creates. So it does not mean that we also create. So what we were trying to discuss here is that there are many attributes of God which are found in ourselves, but not all of them.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, if you could please let them know, people say that whatever is written in your fate is what your life is. Then why do we need dua?
Right. So you see, first of all, this is a misleading statement. There's nothing that has been written. This is a concept that the Quran is absolutely alien to. The Quran at nowhere, at not a single place says that fate has been written. On the contrary, it says everything that is going to happen in future is in the knowledge of God. God knows what's going to happen. It's not that He's written or He's driven us to do something. So this is something which has arisen. This understanding has arisen because of the fact that we think that everything has been written down, and therefore, what is the reason that we make dua to the Almighty or we supplicate to Him? So you see, supplications themselves are dependent on our asking Him. I mean, if you don't ask, he'll not give. There are so many things that he is going to give because he's planned them to give, and there are other things he's going to give if we ask him to give. So I think that we have to understand that he has not written down everything the way we have been taught. It is that he knows everything that's going to happen, and in his knowledge, he has given us certain choices and certain freedoms, certain things that he will provide us, regardless of whether we ask him or not. And there are certain other things he is only going to give us once we ask him or make dua to him.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, God has knowledge of the future. Can we also gain that ability on some level through experience? Through true dreams, we do have that ability anyway.
I don't think that can happen any time. In the matter of the dream also is something that we will always know once the dream has materialized. So we will never have a certain knowledge of the future. We will never have that beforehand. Yes, once a dream happens, we can in retrospect say that it was a true dream. But that is not the case with God. He knows what's going to happen in future. So that cannot be held analogous. So our knowledge of the future is something that is, I would say, conjectural. There are people who predict the future. There are palmists. There are astrologers. There are other people, but they don't. I mean, we all know that it's not a science. To know whether a subject is a science or not, you'll see whether that subject is taught in a university or a college as well. Have you ever seen palmistry or astrology as a subject in any college or university? The answer is no, because they cannot be scientifically explained. But still, people do conjecture and speculation, and at times that speculation comes true. So that doesn't mean that we have certain knowledge of the future. And as I said regarding dreams, this can only be true. I mean, this can only be relied upon once that dream actually happens. Then we can say, yes, I dreamt in the past and that dream was correct. Otherwise, once I dream something and that pertains to the future, unless that future materializes, I can never be certain. So again, that element of uncertainty is going to be there.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Ruhi Rasul, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, if you are extremely upset about a person and he or she has been very strict or harsh on you throughout, and suddenly in your heart you say some bad words or utter a bad dua against that person, and it becomes true within a short period, should you feel guilty about uh,
I mean, you need not feel guilty, because if you did something because of someone who did something bad to you and you just said those words and they materialized, either they could have materialized because of your I mean, invoking yourself before God, or God could himself have ordained these by his own accord. It could be either of these two things. But if the person deserves something, then I don't think you should feel guilty, regardless of whether you prayed in favor of him or against him.
Thank you
okay,
very
you may not be I mean you will not be uh, given sort of I've lost the word which I wanted to say.
Can you say it in a different language?
कि आपको गुनाह मिलेगा उसका.
I don't think so. That should not be the case, because if someone did something bad to you, you have the prerogative to say so. And the Quran has said this: "La yuhibbullahu al-jahra bisui illa man zulim." That except, I mean, you are not allowed to say something ill about anyone. La yuhibbullahu al-jahra bil qawli illa man zulim, which means that if someone has been rude to you, someone has insulted you, that is the only occasion on which you are able to. I mean, you are given the option to say bad words about that person, and this, I would say, includes uh, making dua against him in front of the Almighty.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. So, related to that question, person asks, so the future is not set in the stone and you can change it through dua and effort. Is that true?
I mean, as I said, the future is in the knowledge of God, and at times we make our own destiny, and at other times we don't. So see, this it's a mix of both things, because at times we make an intent of doing something and God does not allow it to happen. And if it is a good intent, we'll get the reward for them. And if it is a bad intent, we might be still punished for that. So you see, and on other occasions, God does not interfere, and whatever we intend to do, we are able to do it as well. So it's like a mix of things, I would say.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, what has God to gain out of this test?
That's something we need to ask him actually.
Thank you. I had a question related to Allah's traits. So
Mm-hmm.
he had one of his traits is like being angry at people when they do bad things, and so we also get angry. But we're supposed to channel our anger in positive ways if we want to be good people.
Mm-hmm.
But why
Mm-hmm.
is Allah allowed to use his anger to punish people?
It's very similar to our own disposition. Don't we punish rapists or child molesters or
Yeah.
people who do such bad things? So remember, God's anger is against people who are arrogant, who deliberately do wrong things, who kill people, who indulge in absolutely heinous acts, who destroy people, who kill people, innocent people. I mean, we would have the same anger, don't
Mhm.
we? Yes, at times we might forgive, and at times God also forgives. Otherwise, I think these emotions of anger from God, they would not have been understood if we would not have had those same emotions. Otherwise, we would have said that why does God, who is a noble being, who is a merciful being, why would he get angry? Precisely because things which are evil, things which are heinous, things which are horrible, I mean, they have to be checked. And this can only be done if that emotion of anger is there with you.
Thank you very much for that perspective, Dr. Saleem. Thank you for another wonderful session. Oh, we just got one more question. We're
Okay.
close to the end of our time, so this will be the last question that we take. This one asks, so if we intend to do a major sin, but then circumstances stop us, would we still get this sin of doing it? Because
Yes. So I answered this question earlier on as well, and I said that this is now the prerogative of God. He might, I mean, if you feel remorse and you ask for forgiveness and you repent, He might accept that. And on other occasions, if He thinks that the nature of the crime was such that there's no such remission or no nothing that He can commute, then He could penalize us for that intent as well. So what we need to do is that if we realize that we intended something wrong, then of course we should try to repent and seek his forgiveness as much as possible.
thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Thank you for answering our questions and another very informative session. And thanks to all the participants for coming through and asking wonderful questions. This helps us all use our brain power and get a better understanding of Islam. So thank
All
you
right.
all, and see you all tomorrow on another session of textual study of the Quran. Until then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.